9:31, I'll call the meeting to order, and the first item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Not seeing any. Minutes. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that the minutes from the April 17, 2024 council meeting be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with those minutes? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So this is the second last meeting in this chamber. Only one more to go here before we go to the new office, so I don't really have a whole bunch more to say about that other than like maybe take a moment and think about that. Like, there's been almost 50 years of Zorra council meetings here, and before that North Oxford council meetings here, not in this room but in this building. So yeah, like think about that. Maybe for the next meeting in 2 weeks will be the last one in this chamber before we go to the new building. No public comment period, no public meetings or drainage meetings, and no delegations. So we jump straight down to Section 8, Reports from Public Services Department, and 8.1 Roads Division, Report 2024-052 from the Director of Public Services regarding a Public Works Monthly Departmental Report. Steve, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
Yes, good morning. No, nothing to highlight, so open for questions.
Questions from council on the report? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that report 2024-052 from the Director of Public Services be received and filed for information purposes only. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 8.2, Recreation and Facilities Division, report 2024-054 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities regarding monthly departmental activities. And Sophia, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
Yeah, I'll just take the opportunity to share that swim lesson registration is officially open today. There are spots available.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Stewart.
Just one thing I had a question on when I was looking through this again last night, but we are expanding like pickleball and other programs using our facilities, and I think a better way, sharing the spaces and say the arenas for when we take the ice out, we're moving pickleball into there. I'm assuming that's to run summer camps. What kind of outreach are we doing, or what are ways that we can find out what, maybe new people to town, or what other programs are we targeting based on interest from the public, or how do we gather that data?
Yeah, Ali and I have really kind of been doing a grassroots outreach at this stage, just chatting with users of our current group, chatting with staff who are currently out in the community running fitness programming. So we have had a few meetings this week actually to explore fall programming opportunities, and we're kind of segmenting out the different populations, senior programming, parent and taught, chatting a lot with our user groups of the facilities, our early ons, VONs, and seeing how we can complement the programming that's already being offered. So I think there's a lot to look forward to this fall.
Anyone else? Councillor Mitchell.
Not a question, but just want to thank Sophia for including the extra, appendices in there with disc golf, the pickleball, and the diagram of the Emerald Pavilion. Just a little extra visual information that I appreciated, and I think anybody reading the agenda would get more out of that.
Anyone else? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2024-054 from the Manager of Recreation and Facilities be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Just a comment from me on the disc golf. I think it's fantastic. It's a new recreation programming and service that we didn't have before, and now we have it, and that's a good thing to be offering our residents, like, as Councillor Stewart said, things they're asking for and new things that they didn't have before is a good news story for sure. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And report 2024-050 from the manager of recreation and facilities regarding naming the Wildcat Trail. Sophia, is there anything you want to highlight for council there?
Nothing to highlight. Open to questions.
Questions from council? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council approve naming the trail between Banner Road and Middleton Street as Wildcat Trail. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 8.2C, report 2024-053 from the Recreation and Facilities Manager regarding the ice transition plan for EZCC and TDRC. Sophia, is there anything you want to highlight in that?
I'll just share that since this report, we have had more input into the survey, about 6 more responses, bringing the total to 15, all in favor of the plan.
Questions from council on the report? Councilor Mitchell.
3 questions, Sophia. First of all, the additional revenue in Thamesford, was that exclusively because the Trojans did so well in their playoff run?
The Trojans accounted for about 1/3 of the revenue from our rentals. We had a good mix of leagues who continued on, started tryouts, moved to 3-on-3 leagues, as well as private groups. So it was kind of equally spread amongst all of our users.
Okay. And my second question is there potential to increase the rental of ice in Thamesford in the month of April? That's the first time that we left ice in future years.
Absolutely. There will be growth in our rental requests next year now that our groups can account and plan for it year over year. This year we didn't communicate effectively that we were keeping the arena open, and so with that short notice, I don't think as many groups could take advantage of it as they would.
And I appreciate the information you put in about increased utility cost with having the ice in. And I think it was a good comparison using utility costs from a year ago with revenue from this year, although I think the numbers would be adjusted a little bit. Hydro rates went up earlier in the year. Carbon tax came on gas, so the numbers may not be quite as favorable, but there was definitely a significant difference between revenue and utility costs. My question is about labor. Did we have increased labor costs, or did we just reallocate labor into the arena operations that would have been used in, say, preparing the parks and the ball diamonds and that sort of thing?
That was a bit of both. For any daytime rentals, we just utilized the full-time staff that we have. We were pretty strategic to consolidate the rental requests into blocks instead of so that we could have staff on site when the facility was open in the day, and they could still also get out into the parks when there wasn't requests. And then in the evening, we did backfill with some part-time hours with our part-time operators. They at an hourly wage of roughly $25 an hour, it was still well offset by the revenue we were bringing in.
Thank you. That's my question.
Any other questions on the report? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that council approve the proposed ice transition plan for EZCC and TDRC. Is there any discussion? Just from me, just a comment that I think this is fantastic. This is transparent and accountable, and as you said in your response to one of Councilor Mitchell's questions, it's transparent to residents so that user groups can know when the ice is going to be in, when the ice is going to be out. They can plan around it. Everybody has equitable access to plan around it. This is, again, the way we should be doing recreation services, is making it available to people and in a clear way that they know how it is available and how to access it. So, well done. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And item 9, reports from Corporate and Protective Services Department. 9.1, Emergency Services Report 2024-058 from the Fire Chief regarding Zorra Fire and Emergency Services Monthly Report. Josh, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for questions?
Not at this time.
Questions from council on the report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that report 2024-058 from the fire chief be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Almost feels like a consent agenda we're going through here. 9.2, Building Drainage and Bylaw Services, report 2024-047 from the chief building official drainage superintendent regarding monthly departmental activities. Mike, is there anything you want to highlight?
No.
Questions from council? Moved by Mitchell, seconded by Grigg, that report 2024-047 from the chief building official drainage superintendent be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Financial Services, 9.3A, report 2024-056 from the tax collector deputy treasurer regarding the 2024 tax rates. Diane, is there anything you want to highlight?
No, nothing at this time.
Questions from council? Councillor Mitchell.
We're flying through things here, so we got to slow it down a little bit. And I do have a question about the calculations of the 9.57% increase. And I understand that that's made up of, when you add 4.1 and 5.47 together, that's, and if you divide 313.73 into 3279.86, that all comes out to 9.57. But when I divide under Zorra 134.37 into 1652.50, I get a 8.13% increase. And when I divide the county 179.36 into 1197.53, I get a 15% increase, which those are the individual increases in the money required by those two levels of government. So how is it calculated, the 4.1 and the 5.47, and what do those represent?
I'm happy to answer that question from Councillor Mitchell. So the numbers that you provided, effectively the 8.13% that you provided is a tax rate increase that's isolated just to Zorra's portion of the tax bill. Same goes for the county rate that you provided, which I believe was 14.97%. So those are the individual tax rate increases year over year. The 9.57% is when we look at the overall tax bill for a ratepayer, a residential ratepayer property owner within the township. Those are split, the 4.1% Zorra and the 5.47% county. So those are looking at the overall tax bill, the entire tax bill, whereas the previous percentages that were mentioned are in relation to individual tax rates if you specifically look at Zorra and the county.
So what we're providing here is different sets of information. What I was talking about was the increase in individual, and then the 4.1, 5.47 are actually percentages of the increase, so we can assign the blame to which department, which
Correct.
level of government is making up the bulk of that.
Yes,
and I think
absolutely.
in your email answer, you did percentages too, that was more than 50%.
Yes, so if you actually look at the percentage increase that a residential property owner is going to physically see on their tax bill, 42.8% of the increase is related to Zorra's portion of the tax bill, while 57.2% of that increase is related to the county.
Thanks. Thanks for clearing that up for me. I appreciate it.
Sorry, Deputy Mayor Grigg.
Can I just ask a follow-up clarification? So this data is speaking both to the increases at county and the increases at township, but then proportionally how they're weighted in a property owner's tax bill, because there's not when we talk about taxes, we often talk about you're paying your property taxes, but part of it's township, county, and education, but it's not a third, a third, a third. So there's different weight assigned to each value, and so when we see a really high number, say at county, we can make guesses on what that's going to mean for our tax bill, but this is giving this more specific information of what the increase is that we're going to see on our property taxes and what portion of that is attributed to the different categories.
Absolutely. So what we spoke to earlier was in regards to, we looked at tax rate, individual tax rate increases by jurisdiction, essentially county ourselves. Education rates stayed the same for 2024. We then spoke to the increase that a property owner will see on their tax bill and how that's split. If we actually look at the tax bills themselves, a residential tax bill is split 49.7% of what you pay on your tax bill goes towards township-related services. 38.3% goes towards those services that are provided by our upper tier, the County of Oxford, and 12% of the residential tax bill goes to the school boards. So there's lots of percentages, lots of ways to kind of cut the numbers and represent them, but I think you're exactly right. That split in what kind of weight, when you actually get a tax bill, what portion is going to which legislative body makes for good information to provide to our ratepayers.
Any other questions on the report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Mitchell, that council pass bylaw 22-24 to formally adopt the 2024 tax rates. Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Few comments. This is wraps up 6 months later. It's the eventual of all the discussions we had 6 months ago on budget. And this is when you crunch all the numbers, and these are the numbers what it actually costs residents for their property taxes. And you can do all kinds of percentages, and I appreciate what Kim just said. I like knowing how much goes county, township, and education as far as the services we solve. Well, the bottom line is that the increase for a typical residential taxpayer this year is $313.73. And for somebody that's making $25 an hour, that represents 2 days of take-home pay. That's a significant, $313 may not sound like a lot as a number, but 2 days of take-home pay is a significant amount of money as an increase. And also, and that's just for residential, and I will admit I have a bit of a dog in the fight in this one because it impacts our farmers even more, because they not only pay the 313 residential, but the typical one is $364.61 on their 100 acres, the typical farm, for a total of $678.34. My own taxes, by my calculations, are going up $886 this year, just based on the increases. And some people will say, well, we'll tax the farmers. They're all rich. They all have multi-million-dollar properties. And actually, their properties are more than typical because, according to Impact, our 100 acres is worth $1.5 million. Well, we have the best farmland in Canada in Zorra Township, and it's priced that way. 100 acres now is worth at least $3 to $4 million. And if the right person wants it, it's worth more than that. And that's great on your balance sheet, but it doesn't pay the bills today. When the farmer sells his farm, he's going to have a good profit and give the government a big chunk of capital gains tax. But today, they need to have money to pay their taxes. So the numbers that come back to me was our budget levy increase was 12.26%. The county, I believe, was around 16%, if I remember right. And we made some very tough decisions 6 months ago, but in 6 months from now, we'll be making tough decisions on next year's budget. And I don't think that we can saddle people with $300 plus for their residents and $350 plus for their farmland 2 years in a row. So I think it's 6 months off, although staff will be working on it probably 2 months off. But we need to keep that in our back of the mind. We for many years had relatively low tax increases. Last year we had significant double-digit or close to double-digit increases. I don't think that we can do that 2 years in a row, so I just wanted to make that comment.
Anyone else? Yeah, look forward to more of that debate when we start, 2025 budgets. We didn't have a whole lot of that discussion at this table, but in the context of the dollar value increase, 2 days' wages for somebody making $25 an hour that they're going to see on their tax bill, a large chunk of that is due to either explicit or backdoor downloading from the provincial government, right? And where it shows up in this, potentially in this budget, is in policing calls, right? When somebody's mental health and addiction issues are not adequately addressed by the healthcare system, they frequently, unfortunately, end up calling for emergency services, right? Police and fire and ambulance, which isn't us. And those are the most expensive ways to deal with those unaddressed issues, right? So, while the police, fire, and ambulance is not a provincial responsibility, if they don't do the health care, adequately, then we end up dealing with it on a property tax bill. And that's definitely some of what's being seen here. So I think in that context, I think AMO is trying to do a whole lot of work right now on, a fairer system of funding for municipalities, given that there has been explicit and backdoor downloading to municipalities, and that there's two separate debates I think to be had, which is the appropriate level of government to be delivering these services. But separate from that, I think, is the discussion around what is the appropriate form of taxation to pay for those services, right? Property tax is linked to economic prosperity, but it lags it by, at least a couple of years, in some cases maybe 5 to 10 years, whereas a lot of the services that municipalities are delivering now are not. They don't lag that at all. This is not, some of this work is not the work that municipalities were set up to do with property taxes. It's just not, right? Our firefighters, were not, when firefighting was set up by municipalities decades ago, part of that was absolutely not responding to mental health and addiction issues on the streets in our communities. Same thing for police when it was set up years ago. That was not part of the response. Yet now we fund that through property taxes. So, well worth having a discussion in the next round of budgets. Councilor Mitchell.
And I agree with everything you've said, that the reason that we are forced to saddle our taxpayers with significant increases is because over the last 2 decades, the system has been broken. And it needs to change. You've spoken public about it. And so I certainly support all the efforts of the county and yourself, AMO, and if there's anything this council can do to support those efforts to get that balance back, so the services that have been downloaded that should not be paid by property taxes are no longer paid by property taxes, and we can come back to property tax increases that are not taking 2 days' pay out of people's pockets.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Greg.
I'm going to save most of my comments for debates when we get into budget, but because Councillor Mitchell was discussing sort of the impact of what these tax bills are going to be for average residents, but as well for farmers, and how significant that is for our agriculture community, which is incredibly important. I also just wanted to highlight that because of the different classifications of properties, that this is also going to have a significant impact on our small businesses that are going to be feeling this. We pay how much we, in relation to a residential tax bill, you're paying more or less in relation based on the nature of your property and the usage of that property. But we have a vibrant network of small businesses across the township that are also going to be feeling this. So that's also part of that consideration, and definitely industrial, commercial through residential and agricultural property impact was definitely at front of mind through previous budget deliberations for myself as well as moving into next year.
Councillor
Very quickly, I appreciate both your comments very much. We are going to vote on this, but we're not really making a decision. All the decisions have been made to come up with these numbers, but I thought it was important that we as a council addressed the impact at this point.
And thanks for making that distinction. Moved by Greg, seconded by Mitchell, that council pass bylaw 22-24 to formally adopt the 2024 tax rates. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 9.4 Legislative Services, Report 2024-055 from the Legislative Coordinator Deputy Clerk regarding proposed fee increase policy. Maggie, is there anything you want to highlight for council?
Nope, I'll just leave it up open for questions.
Questions from council on the report? Councillor Mitchell.
Yes, Maggie, I appreciate the policy. I've got some comments later about why I appreciate it, but my question is, and I understand that there would be probably every 4 or 5 years a comprehensive review of our fees and charges, same as we've done comprehensive reviews of staff salaries, comprehensive reviews of building fees and other things in the last few years. On an annual basis, will staff be taking a look of, and I look at 1.5 in the policy, it says, despite sections 1.1 to 1.3, fees and charges may be adjusted as approved by council to recover at a minimum respective service, administration and capital costs, as well as costs for any other purpose in any amount permitted under applicable law. So will staff be taking a look at fees and charges on an annual basis to see if they are out of whack at that point, or are we waiting until we do this comprehensive review before we address that?
I am able to answer your question to Councillor Mitchell. Staff, when we look at the annual fees, staff always also look to see if it's in line with the area's municipalities. They just do a very overhead review of it at that time, and in depth will go more in every 4 years.
So as part of the budgeting process, when you start out phase one and talking to staff, and you look at revenue, you look at expenses, if they're out of whack, then there's a potential at that point that you'll come to council and say, we're too far out of whack on this. We need to change the fees or the charges during this budget process. But there won't be we'll leave the formal in-depth review for every 4 or 5 years or however it's scheduled.
That's correct. And that's all part of the background of the budget process.
So that answers my question is, how will we know that things are out of whack if there's no real look at it? But you are looking at it, so at that high level, so appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions on the report? Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council approve the proposed fee increase policy attached to report 2024-055. Is there any discussion? Councilor Mitt.
Yeah, as I said, I had a few comments. I like this policy. I think it's fair and transparent method for calculating fees and charges rates. It's clear to council and staff, also for township budgeting and also for personal purposes. And it's clear to our customers of what the rates are going to be going forward, whether that's individual or user groups, so that they can budget their registration fees and things like that. I think it's a more efficient process than what we've done in the past, that we have this policy in place so there may be less individual calculations needed by staff to know where the fees should be put at. And I think there's less chance that things will slip through the crack and we'll have to play catch up on fees and rates, as we've got ourselves into trouble in the past on that. And I'm glad to see there is an opportunity there to address unusual costs and input costs. Some of those are market things that happen. Some of those are changes in legislation that the province says you have to do things. So as we just talked about a few minutes ago, that has a huge impact on us. And I think in a way it takes some of the politics out of this whole process, that we'll have less people lobbying us as a council for fee reduces, or that reduction was the word. But those, I think it leaves it more at a staff level, although it still gives council an opportunity in unusual circumstances, but it all comes down to our drive to be a more business-like operation. So I'm very happy to see this policy, and I applaud Maggie and all the other staff that were involved in developing it.
Deputy Mayor Greg.
And just as a follow-up to Councillor Mitchell's comment about taking the politics out of how we're handling individual concerns and questions around fees, the framework of it takes politics out of it. I also think that there's a benefit to having this policy and taking the politics out of when it's appropriate to invest in these comprehensive reviews. We had some debate at last budget around a comprehensive review around recreation and what those fees should be and how our operational costs are. And when we, piggybacking off of the previous conversation, budgets are really challenging. And I think a comprehensive review can look like something that we want to cut as a method of bringing that tax impact down. But by having this in policy, we're separate from budget, acknowledging the value of investing in this on a regular basis. And in turn, I think that that's going to have a far better outcome for our tax bill for our residents than not doing it at all. So I also see the value in depoliticizing the process of when to invest what into what types of comprehensive reviews.
Anyone else? I think the other thing is, this may not look like it to residents, but this kind of having policies like this is when residents say to us, like, where's the efficiencies in government? Where are you finding those efficiencies? And this is that efficiency in government, because when you have policies like this, it allows staff to allocate resources in a predictable way to say, we know, no, we don't have to worry about that yet because we're going to do it then, and we've already got it blessed by council, and it's transparent how we're going to do it, and they can line all these things up and they can plan their work. If it's all left to council to say, I want to review this, I want to review that, right? Then staff are like, okay, well, we're going to do it, but we're going to have to, reprioritize our work. We're going to have to reallocate resources, and that's inherently inefficient. So having policies like this, while it may not be the fireworks thing that residents are looking for in efficiencies, frequently what efficiencies look like is not fireworks, right? When you're more efficient, it's usually like, there's nothing to see here, this is boring, and that's efficiency, and that's what this policy is council saying, as you said, Councillor Mitchell, right? We want to have a transparent and accountable policy for this, but we want to have a policy for this, and council will say that's the policy, and then we will back away from it. Council always has the ability at some point 10 years down the road to say, no, I don't want to deviate from that. But until then, staff are left to just go and do their work efficiently and deliver on policy. Anybody else? Moved by Greg, seconded by Stuart, that council approve the proposed fee increase policy attached to report 2024-055. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 9.4B, report 2024-013 from the legislative coordinator deputy clerk regarding memorial banner project. Maggie, is there anything you want to highlight for council there?
Nope, I'll leave it open for questions.
Questions from council? Moved by Stuart, seconded by Greg, that report 2024-013 from the legislative coordinator deputy clerk be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, I think this is a reasonable approach. I know in other communities, St. Mary's is the one I'm most familiar with. It is coordinated through the Legion, and a local electrical company uses their bucket truck to put them up. And I know last November when I was driving through, a number of local communities. They had the memorial banners up honoring people who served in many situations, passed away, protecting our country ultimately. So I think this is the proper way to go forward. That this is another one where the township can support it, but it's really up to the community to move forward and implement this.
Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Greg.
And in the report, in the staff comment section, it says if council's interested in this, staff could recommend that council ask for an additional report with that additional information. Just because we're not doing so, or I'm anticipating us not doing so at this point, it doesn't mean that that couldn't happen in the future. I think what I'm cognizant of is that until there's a willing community partner that's ready to move this forward, we wouldn't want to allocate staff time and resources until we know that that's in place.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 10A and B, I have for 10A, correspondence from the Honorable Lisa Thompson, Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs regarding proposed changes to stormwater or other fees. Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that item 10A be received and filed for information purposes only. Questions or discussion? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
So I don't know how, like, I could frame this like a question.
I read the motion. Oh, did I read the motion?
Yeah,
I
the
did.
motion is just
So,
to receive and file.
question, debate, whatever you want.
So this is a blanket correspondence going out to municipalities in relation to fees collected and the impact on our agricultural sector. And I could ask a point of clarification of mayor and staff on whether or not, when I'm reading this, this does not represent what I've participated here in Zorra in terms of what we're doing with our stormwater fees. Can I get clarification that this is not relevant to how we are operating here and there is not the negative impact that's being implied?
Correct. Yep, we do function similar or exactly the same as the letter outlines the way that Brant does, where ag land is excluded.
Okay.
Just slight clarification. It would be more accurate to say that Brant actually functions the way we do, in that we did it first, right? Because we did do it first before they did, so. I have talked with Karen about it already. We are going to write a letter to the minister and just clarify that you don't have to worry about it here, and you're welcome for paving the way so that others can do it the right way. So, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And 10B, correspondence from the Zorra Caledonian Society regarding Highland Games flyover requests. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council direct the mayor to sign the letter of support for the flyover on July 1st, 2024 at the Embro Highland Games. Is there any discussion? Deputy Mayor Grigg.
I have a question of staff. I'd just like to clarify that the mayor has no formal jurisdiction over our airspace or liability if council were to endorse him signing this letter.
That's correct. They are able to do this without council's approval. They're just looking for support from council and more of a awareness to the community, but no authority to the mayor. Sorry.
Okay, so just if I may.
No additional authority to the mayor.
So if I may, I think that this is very exciting. I will be in full support of this. I just wanted mainly clarification for the mayor on what those jurisdictions. Thank you.
You want me to be able to get my head out the door at the end of the meeting? Any other discussion? I thought there'd be more barbs, frankly, than that. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that council direct the mayor to sign the letter of support for the flyover on July 1st, 2024 at the Embro Highland Games. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And And boards and committees, I have a motion here to receive and file 11A and B. Anybody want to do anything different? I will turn it over then to Councillor Mitchell for his Upper Thames River Conservation Authority Board update.
The board meeting on April 16th started off with a delegation from 2 senior staff members from the City of London in support of a 2-zone approach for Mud Creek sub-watershed, which would lead to development of 5,700 acres. And this tied in with the first item on our agenda. And without getting too technical, too deep, every water course has a floodplain attached to it, depending on a number of factors. And up till now, Upper Thames policy being implemented was that all those floodplains were one zone. There was no development allowed within that floodplain. Upper Thames has a policy, but it never adopted it for any particular area for a two-zone floodplain. And that is based on historical flooding levels and also modeling of potential 100-year and 250-year flood events, that there could be areas, the immediate area on either side of a waterway would remain floodplain and would be undevelopable. But further out from that area would be the second zone, which, pending potential alterations to the waterway or to the shoreline and flood-proofing measures mandated for any development, that there may be development allowed in that area. And the specific one where this has been applied to, and which the board approved, was for Mud Creek, which is an area in west central London. You know it better than I do, where there has been historical flooding, but there's been has been some alterations done, will be more alterations done to open up, as I say, 57 hectares of potential development land. And this is being driven because we're running out of land. And so we're the city, with cooperation of Upper Thames staff, is looking at ways that we can use this land and make it developable. So that was the delegation. As I said, the board approved the implementation of this 2-zone for Mud Creek, and then a subsequent hearings committee meeting, we approved the first step in that, which was allowing, when they changed the course of Mud Creek, the dirt that's being removed will be allowed to be stored on site, which is against Upper Thames policy now, because that dirt will be needed later on in the development process. So rather than trucking it all away and then at some point trucking it all back, it's going to be allowed on that area. So that was the biggest and probably the most interesting part of the meeting. Section 28 report, there was no permit applications in Zorra. The project status report update. I had mentioned a couple months ago that at our AGM we had passed a motion that the Upper Thames was going to send a letter to all area municipalities asking for their support in unfreezing the fees on development and regulations department, which are now in their second year of freezing, of being frozen. That letter had not been sent yet, and I asked about it at the meeting. And the day before, the Brian Petrie, the chair, Dean Trentowski, the deputy chair, and Tracy had been at a meeting with the minister as part of a delegation from Conservation Ontario, and Brian specifically talked to the minister about lifting this freeze. The minister was non-committal, but he was not committed to keeping it on either. So the conservation authorities are still going to draft this letter, probably more as a province-wide thing, to ask more support from municipalities to have the users pay more of their share rather than it coming out of the taxpayers ultimately through the levy. We also got some more information about proposed regulations about the minister's permit and review powers, which is a change to the Conservation Act as of April 1st, in which the minister can override the decision of the Conservation Authority to issue or not issue a permit. What we got was more of the guidelines and situations where the minister can use that power. And Conservation Ontario had until today to comment, the usual very brief commenting period on any legislative changes coming out of this government. Fanshawe Hydro Plant has a generating component to it, or the Fanshawe Dam has a hydro plant. It's been there for I don't know how long, but about 5 years ago they were experiencing electrical problems where there was surging coming out of the power being produced, and there was a real fear that it was going to start blowing up computers and things in the Upper Thames headquarters, and they couldn't figure out why, so they shut it down. And then through COVID and staff changes, a whole bunch of things, it has remained shut down till now. And they are now moving forward with bringing in a consultant to sort this out so that they can get it back up, so that they can use the power generated at the Fanshawe Dam to, at minimum, power the headquarters, the Upper Thames, and perhaps more of the facilities. The Children's Safety Village, which has been on the Upper Thames property for over 20 years, in which the Upper Thames took possession of, because the long-term lease ran out, and the organization basically no longer existed that operated the Children's Safety Village. In the last year or so, the 25 small buildings that made up the village itself have all been torn down. There's been some renovations done to the main administration building, and Upper Thames has been using for a variety of community outreach opportunities. The Upper Thames has acquired a 34-acre property along Fish Creek in Perth County, just west of St. Mary's, Rannick, in that area, I believe. It was donated by Brian and Elizabeth Wheeler. And the cost, although they donated the land, there was cost of real estate costs and whatnot. All that money came through the Canada Nature Fund, which is a federal government fund, so there was no cost to the Upper Thames to get it's 34 acres of bush with a very sensitive creek going through it, so a good addition to the Upper Thames property. So that was our meeting.
Any questions? I have moved by Stuart, seconded by Grigg, that items 11A and B be received and filed for information purposes only. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. No unfinished business, no notice of motion. Bylaws. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Stewart, that bylaws 21-24 and 22-24 be taken as read a first, second, and third time and finally passed, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And the calendar, and since Councillor Finch isn't here, we're going to have to do this ourselves. So tonight, the Zorra Heritage Committee is having an event in the Harrington Grist Mill. I can't remember exactly what that is that's going on tonight. I think it's to do with their new website and all the different.
I think it's the meeting of the committee is going on the road, which they do once in a while, and they're coming to the Harrington Grist Mill.
They had that already, I think. When they had the OPP there. That was last week. The next thing I have on here is this Sunday Ambro Legion brunch at 9 till noon, I think, something like that. And Paul, Councilor Mitchell.
The Harrington Community Auction, donations tomorrow, May the 2nd, and Saturday. And then the online auction itself runs from May 8th to the 14th. And next week is Wisdom Wednesday at the Brown School, 7:30 p.m. And the topic is the Bob Hayward journey, about the Bob Hayward, the racer. This ties in with Thistle Theater's play that ran in the spring. And also, I believe this is being, the speaker is the same one that spoke at the Beachville Museum at about the same time, which had a sellout audience. So if anybody missed that presentation, a week from tonight at Brown School.
That's good news, because that was really well attended and very well received. Well, that's good. This is Smile Cookie Week. Tim Hortons in Tempsford partners with Andrew's Legacy. They work to get AEDs out in the community, and I don't know the number, but there is a significant increase in the presence of AEDs in Zorra Township due to their hard work. I've never seen Tim Hortons so jazzed up in my life. It is an exciting adventure to go to Tim Hortons this week, and on my drive into council this morning, I saw Tempsford fan favorite Tim Hortons worker Alice dancing outside the drive-through with a cookie, an oversized cookie, like a cardboard cutout. So if you haven't already filled your belly with cookies, it truly goes to a good cause that truly serves our community. I also will remind you that they are freezable, so if you've had enough cookies but you want to continue to support, they're great gifts for people, or you can freeze them. Tomorrow, several of us from staff and council will be participating and volunteering to decorate some cookies, so if you're out and about, pop in and get your cookies, and you might be able to let us know about a pothole or something else that's irking you. What else? Oh, there was one more in here. It's a little bit outside of this next 2-week range, but Multi-Use Courts Committee is going to be hosting a pickleball fundraiser. It is a community battle where local businesses, firefighters, and community group executive members will be putting in teams. It may not be the most athletically skilled of pickleball competitions. We have normally very high-skilled pickleball players that participate in our tournaments. This one is more for people that represent the faces around the community. It's going to be at the Tempsford District Recreation Center on Saturday, June 1st. There's going to be lots of fun moving pieces. It's more of a spectacular event, and if you would like more information, feel free to reach out to myself or follow the group on social media.
On Saturday, May 11th, the Beachville Museum's having a tea, right? Yeah, Heritage Society's having a tea. And also later that day at 2 o'clock, it's in Woodstock, but it is relevant here. Over the last few years, unfortunately, recently grown Ukrainian community in Oxford is having Vishvanka Day. They're going to have a small parade in Woodstock. And the reason I bring that up is because there's several Ukrainian refugees that settled in Zorra Township very, very early in the Russia-Ukraine war. And David and Karen Murray, who live in Tempsford, were, the main driving force behind setting up the Oxford response to how those people were going to be received and settled and employed and housed and all those things. So if anybody's interested, Vishvanka Day is, that stereotypical Ukrainian shirt and those beautiful like white and embroidered shirts. So I guess it's a celebration thing that they do. So there's going to be a parade in downtown Woodstock, and surprisingly, they're going to have pizza afterwards. I emailed back and I said, really? Like not pierogies, but cabbage rolls? But anyway, pizza. But anyway, if you're tempted, David and Karen Murray reached out on that because, and I think if you're tempted at all to go, like they've done like an absolutely phenomenal amount of work over the last several years in settling Ukrainians here, and former Councillor Ron Forbes hosted a Ukrainian family for 6 months or a year or something like that, who are they're not in our community anymore, but I mean that in a way that's a success story. So there's that, and then I think that was all I had before we're back here on the 15th. Yeah. else? All right, then, no closed session, confirmatory and adjournment, you're good? Moved by Stewart, seconded by Grigg, that bylaw 23-24, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held May 1st, 2024, be read a first, second, and third time this May 1st, 2024, and further, that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And moved by Grigg and seconded by Stewart that this session of council be now adjourned and herewith closed at 10:26 a.m. And the next meeting of council be called for May 15th, 2024 at 6 p.m. in the council chambers of the Township Municipal Office. Is there any discussion? So that will be at the last time in the municipal office. So the resolution won't change going forward. It'll still say at the Township Municipal Office, but it won't be here. So enjoy this. Any other discussion?